Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar from Alzheimer's San Diego. And I am pleased to be here with all of you folks today. People are still just coming into the webinar. We will jump right into things here. So my name is Jean Alton. I'm a dementia care consultant with Alzheimer's San Diego. And I'm very happy to say I've got some colleagues with me here today. And co-presenting with me is Mina Nilchin, and she is actually a senior dementia care consultant with Alzheimer's San Diego and a social worker. Hi, Mina.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so our agenda for today is fairly broad, and that's quite intentional. We want to give all of you a really kind of wide scope of the things to be thinking about and planning for if you haven't already. If you are a person living with memory loss, or if you are a care partner to somebody living with memory loss. So we'll talk about the disease overview of progression and symptom management, what it is looking like as the dementia, whatever type of dementia it may be, is causing some changes in cognition, memory, and other areas as well too. We'll talk about building a support system. This is ever so important, and how we, go about doing that, and especially given some of the challenges we have today with sheltering in place with the pandemic. Coping with daily challenges. Again, this is of particular importance given that we have less access to some of the resources that are out there right now. We'll very briefly review legal and financial considerations and safety planning, and then we'll close out with some resources for help and support. So we're just going to touch on each of these areas with some things for you to think about. And what I want to let you know, and we'll let you know as we go throughout today's webinar, is that we have several classes that are very specific to these topic areas, including legal and financial considerations, safety issues, resources. Home care, daycare, memory care is a resource-laden webinar. So you can definitely delve deeper into these subject areas, either by webinars or by calling us or looking on our website, or by a combination of all those things. So I'm going to turn it over here to Mina, and she will get us going. Mina, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like Jean said, we're going to be covering a lot of information today. And so what I told Jean when we did our run through is, when you get started with this journey, you don't know what you don't know. And so to me, this class is really highlighting areas of exploration. And so it's going to be content heavy. And we're going to check on a lot of things. And I'm going to let you know which of these topics we do have a whole separate class on. We have Brooke in the question and answer. If you have questions, we might not get to them. And then we have our follow-up if you do need to explore some of these topics more. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about the disease itself, its progression, managing the symptoms, and things to expect really from a disease point of view to get us started and make sure that we are on the same page in understanding the pathology of dementia, the terminology that we're going to use, and the things that we're going to, expect to see in the coming years. Oops. So it's going to be really helpful to talk a little bit about what dementia is versus what it is not. There's a lot of demystifying that we need to do in this area. And so you've probably had the question, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? And we will go over that. Clicking, come on. Oh, there we go. Okay. So dementia is, by definition, a group of symptoms caused by an underlying medical condition. And the things that define dementia are the impairment of cognitive function, some behavior changes, and an interference with the ability to execute normal activities of daily living. So dementia is actually an umbrella term that includes a lot of other things underneath it. The medical condition can be a lot of different things. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia and the kind of dementia that is brought up the most. But other types of dementia include frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, and none of these are actually mutually exclusive. So these can come in combination with one another, and they all have different pathologies. Now, you might go to the doctor and end up with just a diagnosis of dementia. That happens quite a bit, but technically, there's a medical condition that is causing the dementia. The dementia refers to a collection of symptoms. What dementia is not is a specific disease. So when we say dementia, we're using a very broad term. The specific disease is Alzheimer's disease, is frontotemporal dementia, is Lewy body dementia. That's what the specific disease is. And there's a difference between dementia and just the typical trajectory of aging. And we'll talk a little bit about that difference. But the key phrase here is interfering with normal activities. That's a lot of what constitutes the difference between the normal process of aging, the most common and typical process of aging, and what we see with a dementia-related diagnosis. And finally, one thing to understand is dementia is not exclusive to older adults. Now, it is the category of people in dementia, a big chunk of people who are diagnosed with a dementia-related disease are going to be 65 and older, but we do see dementia diagnoses in those younger than that age range. And so it is possible to see individuals in their 50s and even their late 40s. There are definitely, because there are so many different kinds of dementia, we are going to see a lot of different kinds of disease trajectories in different age groups. We are going to see it most commonly within the 65 and up age range. So we're going to talk a little bit about the progression of the disease. Here at Alzheimer's San Diego, we try to keep it as simple as possible, and we use kind of a 3-category progression. The early, the middle, and the late stage, also mild, moderate, and severe. And when we're talking about dementia, we're talking about a pretty slow progression of symptoms. So if we're looking at something where somebody, within a span of a week has completely changed in their cognition, that they're a different person than they were 2 weeks ago or a week ago, that's likely not a dementia-related issue and probably needs some medical attention right away. When we're talking about dementia, we're noticing changes within a span of months to years. Dementia is very hard to predict. So it's very hard to look at someone and say, this is what symptoms we're going to see in a year. This is what we're going to see in 5 years. The variability is really high, right? You see on this slide, the progression of the disease can take 2 years and it can take 20 years. That's a pretty large window, and admittedly not a very helpful window for being able to predict the future. And that's what can make the experience of this disease so challenging. So we'll start describing what we'll see in those stages, starting with the early stage of the disease. So with early dementia, we're noticing some short-term memory loss. We're noticing occasional confusion or disorientation, right? What was I just doing? Where was I just going? Did I take care of that task earlier or not? And so that's going to be happening from time to time. And we're going to start to see some challenges with those instrumental activities of daily living, especially with those activities that require a lot of thought sequencing, right? So for example, you see managing money on that list. Managing money takes a lot of thought sequencing. Did I make that withdrawal yesterday or do I need to make it today? Did I pay my taxes? All of the steps that have to do with that. Driving is a big one, right? You might get in your car, and it happens to a lot of us where we get in our car and we have to refresh where we were going to go. We're going to notice that more in the early stages of a dementia-related disease. Meal preparation, right? All the steps it takes to prepare yourself a meal. Perhaps there might be a risk of leaving the oven on when you were preheating it to make a meal because of some short-term memory loss that's being experienced. Maybe there's some forgetfulness around the fact that we started that process of preparing a meal. So these are the things that kind of start punctuating our days in the early stages of dementia. So then we get to the middle and moderate stage of the disease. We use those interchangeably, middle and moderate. Typically, this is the longest stage of the disease, but again, we're talking in very general terms. With the middle and moderate stage, we're going to see an increase of frequency in those moments of confusion, more forgetfulness, more disorientation. So we're just seeing a frequency increase in those kinds of things. One thing you'll definitely start noticing, maybe even in the early stages, is challenges related to language and communication. And this can mean a lot of things. This can mean having trouble finding words, or having trouble constructing and finishing a sentence. Or maybe you were saying something and you forget the point that you were trying to make. The thing about dementia is we typically associate it with memory loss, right? Just not remembering. But with what's happening in the brain, think about it. The brain controls all that we do. And so depending on the part of your brain being affected, you're going to see different kinds of symptoms. And one part of the brain that is very commonly affected is language, being able to process language and being able to communicate. And so we're going to start during this stage to rely and lean more on nonverbal communication, on reminders and cues, and helping someone get their message across through the different senses, not just relying on speaking, through sound, through images, through touch. In the middle stages, we'll start to see more difficulty with those basic activities of daily living, right? As that short-term memory starts to get affected more, maybe there might be some forgetfulness around when the last time was that I took a shower. Just needing some more cueing to remember those activities of daily living, right? Think about the memory that it takes to sequence together all of the tasks that you need to prepare a meal. And in the middle stage, that's going to get harder and harder to piece together, what you were going to do with your day, what you were going to do next. And really, in all stages of the disease, we need to be thinking about safety. We need to be thinking about it in the early stage, and it especially becomes a concern in the middle stage. Because think about it, when our memory isn't working like it used to, there's a lot of vulnerabilities there. Walking out the door with an intention and then not knowing what the intention was to begin with, that's what causes wandering. Or, that example I keep bringing up of leaving the oven on. And so this is when we are going to start to look at more supervision, more support to make sure that the safety is being, that everyone is safe in the household. And then we get to the final stage, which is the late, or often referred to as the severe stage of the disease. And so in this stage of the disease, we are looking at a lot more limited verbal communication, right? We are really not relying on being able to speak to communicate with one another. We're relying a lot more on different kinds of communication. Again, that touch, that maybe music or images, things like that. The late stage is really defined by the changes in verbal communication. At this stage of the disease, there needs to be a lot more assistance with all activities of daily living, and pretty much close to, if not 24-hour supervision. Reason being that what is going on with the dementia is that it's affecting more parts of the brain that might have to do with mobility, with moving around, with being able to even physically complete tasks. Examples of that would be chewing and swallowing, right? The muscle memory that it takes to remember to chew food adequately, to swallow it. There might be some risks there, so there need to be some adjustments made to maintain safety. And there's going to be a reduction in independent mobility and reduced physical activity. So while movement is still important, there may need to be a lot more assistance with that movement. We might see an introduction of a walker or a cane to help with moving around, helping someone up and out of their chair, onto a toilet, into the bathtub. And of course, safety is still very much a consideration here, and something to be aware of, because at this point the memory and mobility is very much affected. So when we talk about dementia at this time, scientists and doctors do not have a cure or a way to reverse the disease, a way that has been tested and validated on a large scale. They're working furiously at that, but there isn't really anything out there that has been clinically proven on a large scale to reverse or stop the disease. So what we're looking at is a combination of things to help manage the symptoms and maximize quality of life. The name of the game at this point after a diagnosis is quality of life. And that should be the name of the game at any age range, right? Dementia doesn't change that, but we become very aware of that when we're dealing with a disease like dementia. You might be prescribed some of the medications that are on your screen right now. I'm going to name some of them off. They might ring some bells: Aricept, Namenda, Exelon, Razidine, and Namzaric. These medications, they're not going to stop the disease. They're not going to necessarily reverse what's happening in the brain, but they might kind of give your cells some help in delaying the progression of the symptoms. And so the disease process is going to continue, but your brain cells are going to put up a little bit more of a fight when it comes to the symptoms that come with that disease. Now, like with most medications, these are going to come with their own side effects. And if you do notice, this is an ongoing conversation with your doctor. If you do notice those side effects really affecting quality of life, that is something that needs to be brought up. The next way that we manage symptoms is through behavioral intervention, right? When we know what we're dealing with the disease, we can modify our behavior and our environment to adapt to what we're dealing with now, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about new normal, but we can address triggers, we can address the environment. We can make the house a little bit brighter. We can make our environment easier to manage. We can add some safety devices to keep someone safe. Those are the changes that we can make. They're non-medical changes, and they're things that we can learn about as we learn about the disease. And communication is also a really big one. When we are aware of what's happening in the brain, then we can adapt our communication strategies accordingly to address those changes in the brain. Communication is a whole separate class that we have, and one that I highly recommend. It really does need to be its own class, and it is. And finally, as caregivers, you need support. One way that you have engaged in that support today is through an education class. When we know what we're dealing with, we're better equipped to deal with it. When we demystify, we're better equipped to deal with it. Building those skills, building those capacities, and also, as much as we can, as much as we have access to, finding ways to get a break, to recharge your batteries, to refresh, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. And this journey can be very draining. And as much as you can build your support system, the better off the whole family system is going to be. So like I said, you're adjusting to a new normal, and this journey is going to bring up a lot of different things, a lot of different emotions. And it's okay to take some time to acknowledge that. There might be some sadness. There might be some fear. There's so much unknown, right? I showed you in that slide. We don't have a lot of answers as to what the next 5 years are going to look like, or even what the next year is going to look like. And that can be a scary thing. So it's okay to sit down with those emotions and acknowledge and accept that that's how you're feeling, and give yourself time to adjust, right? You might walk out of this class feeling overwhelmed, and that's a very normal emotion. And that's why, we have Brooke in our chat, making sure that you're aware that we have a way to follow up with a dementia care consultant to help process some of the things that you're learning about today. And one thing that I that I always say is be compassionate with yourself enough to be flexible. We all make plans about what our lives are going to look like. And the thing is, most of us are not living out plan A. Most of us are probably also not living out plan B. We might be on plan K at this point. And we need to be compassionate enough with ourselves to recognize that life throws things at us we never could have known. And being flexible with those changes is the compassionate thing to do. We have a picture of a tree changing its leaves on that slide because this is a new season. Change comes with every stage of life, and this journey is no exception. People say that San Diego doesn't have seasons, but we do, and we see those leaves changing, and the leaves of life as it looks like are eventually going to change. And so flexibility is really important. Practice patience and forgiveness with yourself and others. And I don't know if it was written that way deliberately, but I like that yourself is first on that, because you have to be patient with yourself first in order to gain the capacity to be patient with others. Excuse me. Patience is going to be really necessary in this journey, but remember, you are the number one person deserving of compassion in this. Education is really powerful. We want to demystify the unknown, and you're educating yourself today. And we also really recommend letting people in your support system know that we're here for education. Maybe you're going to become an advocate and an educator in this as well. And so however that needs to happen, education is very empowering in this. And like I said before, you can't pour from an empty cup. So you're going to need a support system. And one thing that I like to recommend to families is write it out, right? Write your name, and around your name, write who is in your support network and in your support system so that you can see it visually. Is it your family? Is it your friend? Is it your neighbors? Is it your church, right? We forget who our support systems are sometimes. So write it out. Maybe even jot their phone numbers down underneath their name so that you know that they're there. And one name that I want you to make sure to write in that is Alzheimer's San Diego. And have our number handy and put it in your phone. Do that today. So I think now's the time to clickety click. All right, so we went over quite a lot already. Jean, you are on mute, my love. There we go.
Sorry about that. It was actually good that I was on mute because I just sneezed.
Oh, bless you.
Sneeze.
Belated bless you.
Yes. So, for any questions that you folks may have about all that Mina has just covered here about the disease, the overview of the disease, and the progression and symptom management, please go ahead and put those in Q&A for us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Mina, I just want to say, you mentioned, the graphic of the tree there, and that just really resonates with me because actually my grandmother always said some of her general advice in life was, she said, be like the giant oak tree, that lives through some of the Canadian winters where I come from. And, where it's so cold and it's covered in snow and the ground is frozen, and the oak tree just stands still. And then during storms, branches get broken and leaves get taken down, and the oak goes with the wind and is just flexible and strong. Combination of both those things. So I just like that idea, and I think it's just kind of a good metaphor for the changes that come upon us that are beyond our control, and how we need to do our best to respond to them. So it looks like we got kind of a quiet group here today. So if there's no questions, we will just kind of continue on. So I am going to talk very briefly here about building your support system. And what I have to say is Mina already gave a great introduction. So here is really the graphic of what she was talking about, where you put pen to paper and look at what your support system looks like. And of course, that's you in the middle, the most important. And by the way, support systems are for all of us. They are for care partners, and they are for people living with a diagnosis of some type of dementia, living with memory loss. And they are for all of us just in life. It's good to have a plan for your support system, have it kind of figured out. And because, look, as Mina very rightly pointed out, we kind of envision our life unfolding like plan A, and lots of things happen. So we do have to go to plan C, D, E, F, lots of different plans. And it's good to know who is in our circle, who are the people who have our backs. And I always just kind of say, who are your people? Who are my people? And another, by the way, here is, it doesn't necessarily have to be family either. You know, I think sometimes we have this cultural expectation that family is part of our support system, but there are families where people are not close, who they don't share the same belief systems, where they are not reliable for one another. And, you know, those folks then should not be in our support system. So when we're planning the support system, think about who you communicate with regularly and openly. You know, these are whatever you call them, your besties, your BFFs, the people that you can be totally upfront and honest with, and people who you care about and they care about you. And when I say communicate regularly, I always want to add the caveat that my example is, I'm very lucky. I have several friends, and two in particular I'm thinking of, that I have been friends with really almost all my life. The one fellow, we were babies together. Our moms threw us in the playpen together. And they live back in Canada, so I don't see them regular, and we don't talk all the time. It'll be, maybe 2 or 3 months. Sometimes it's been longer. But every time we connect, we pick up exactly where we left off. So the passage of time has not changed that close communication we have, even though it's not regular, daily, weekly, whatever you call it. So think about that. The people in your support system recognize and respond to the changes that you are experiencing. If you let them know about it and they're aware of whatever challenges are going on. And they maximize quality of life for you, whether you're the person living with dementia or you're the care partner. If they detract or take away from your quality of life, that's not a support. So, and there are some people in our lives that do that. And so think about that as well too. So not what you need at this time and point in your life when you're dealing with, living with memory loss or the diagnosis of dementia. So whoever is in your support network is, your definition, whatever that looks like. For sure, I echo what Mina said, is get Alzheimer's San Diego in that support system. And, there's all different ways that we can be a support to you. And if you contact us, we can work on some individual plans specific to you. And I just look at all the others, everything from family or friends, community-based services like us, churches, legal and financial people, other, healthcare providers, your doctors, your pharmacist, your pharmacy, all those different things that can be a part of your support system. So, and I'm seeing, oh, look, this wonderful note here in Q&A. And it's one of our attendees saying a wonderful saying, and it is. It goes, you can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you. So basically, if you're not getting the support from those around you, find new people to come into that circle. And it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. So sharing the diagnosis, this is always an interesting discussion because, again, there's no right or wrong answer with this. But it's important for you to have this conversation, this discussion with, again, your closest support network, the people who are in your inner circle, to come to some decisions about things, about who do you tell? Who is it going to be? Some people like to tell lots of people, and they've come to a point of being comfortable with the diagnosis, and they want to let everybody know and be upfront about it. Others don't feel, ready to do that for whatever reasons, and neither is right or wrong. It's what's right for you. Some people like to tell their neighbors and some don't. There's just such a wide variety here. Also, talking with children and young adults and thinking about how you communicate the diagnosis and what the expected changes in a person are going to be like. And these are things that we can help you to find the language for. And we do have some great resources on specific to talking with children and young adults. Then, of course, there is let me see if I can do this without messing things up, the when of things. You can decide who it is you're going to tell, and then when. Now, maybe there's some people that you want to tell right away, and maybe there's others that you'll tell later on. It's a need to know basis. Maybe they don't need to know about it right now. And so, yes, these are the questions you're asking. Do they need to know? And when do you want them to know? So these are important to think about as well, too. And then there is the how. You can do it all sorts of different ways, of course, in person, phone, or in writing, Zoom, FaceTime. And you can offer to connect them to information and supportive resources. Here's the thing. We always want to just let you know that you don't have to go through this big, long kind of educating your family and friends every time you're telling them that you or somebody you live with or care for or love is living with a diagnosis of memory loss, some type of dementia. If you choose to be the one who's the educator, of course, that's fine. And also know that you can come to us and let us step into that role. So, you have the option of being able to say to a family member, we've recently got a diagnosis about your dad's memory loss, and it looks like it's dementia. And we're still adjusting to this ourselves. And a really good resource for you to reach out to as a family member to find out about it is Alzheimer San Diego. And so you're giving them that option and permission to go ahead and contact us. And, I say permission, people don't need permission, but, sometimes if a family member hears it from you yourself as a care partner or a person living with dementia, you're encouraging them to reach out to us, that they are more willing to do that. And then we'll take on that education part of things for people. And I say that simply because I've heard, and I'm sure Mina can speak to this as well too, lots of families say kind of how exhausting the whole process of telling people about the diagnosis and just going through all the different kind of bits and pieces of it can be very challenging. And, I think I just wanted to say that there was a question earlier that says, how do I convince people I have the dementia diagnosis, who rarely talk to me? And I think often of a lady we have worked with who has had that same issue going on in her circle of friends, who are her peer group, and she's an older lady, and so she tells them she's been diagnosed, and they say, oh, go on, it's just, you know, you're getting older, we all have memory loss. So they negate the diagnosis for her, and she's found that really frustrating. So that, you know, is an instance where potentially, if friends are willing to reach out to Alzheimer's San Diego, we can dispel some of the myths and the misunderstandings they have about what's normal age-related memory loss and what isn't. So just keep that in mind, folks. So feel free in the chat box to just share any of your observations or experiences with your dementia diagnosis and telling others, and some of the reactions you've maybe received from people, and you know, just whatever else you may choose to share with all of us would be terrific. And we'll just leave that in chat, and Brooke will be having a look at that. If there's anything that she needs to jump in on, she will do that. So I'm going to turn it over again to Mina, and she's going to talk for a little bit here about coping.
Yes, and I just requested controls.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, doing my best not to mess with the technology this time. So, you know, the name of the game, like I said earlier, is quality of life. And there are some changes that we're going to talk about to cope with the challenges that come with a dementia diagnosis. We're going to be talking about how to cope with those daily challenges. And one of the big challenges, like I said, a very common challenge, is the changes in communication. And the way that those changes in the brain can manifest themselves as changes in communication, one is trouble finding the right words, difficulty understanding the meaning of words, right? A word has lost its meaning to you suddenly. One big challenge is filtering out that background noise, right? Imagine you're at a restaurant, everyone is talking at once, and the music is playing way more loudly than it really needs to be. The waiter is trying to talk to you. Imagine the confusion in that situation, and that gets even harder to decipher and differentiate as the disease progresses. There might need to be an increased reliance upon visual clues. So if we're having trouble finding words, or if we're having trouble processing the words coming into our brains, we might just have to use our hands and point and exaggerate and make our point in different ways. Visual reminders, a whiteboard, a post-it note. And something that's gonna be inevitable, and right, we're talking about acceptance and sitting with where we are, there's gonna be frustration. When communication gets harder, communication is the meat of life, right? This is how we connect with other people. So when that's not working like it used to, there's going to be frustration that comes with that. Another thing that we can typically see is if you speak more than one language, you might start mixing those languages up and reverting back to a language that you spoke primarily, if English is your second language, and you know, in different contexts, speaking a different language than you typically would. One thing to remember that underscores all of this is that these changes are a result of a progressive disease. They're symptoms of a disease. They don't speak to your intelligence as a person, your worth as a human. They don't indicate that you're trying to be difficult. And that's something that really needs to be remembered over a mantra. This is the disease. So when it comes to strategizing communication, and again, this is its own class because it needs to be. It's a very well-attended class because it is so helpful. But some of the things we talk about in that class is one, speaking slowly and clearly, right? Enunciating. No more complex, long-winded sentences. We keep it clear and to the point. Taking your time. And adapting the physical environment. If it's time to catch up with some friends or family, the restaurant might not be the best place for that. A crowded restaurant might not be the best place for that anymore. Maybe lemonade on the porch is now the new normal. That's setting yourself up for success, because we know how the disease is making communication harder, and that's how education is empowering us, right? Repetition is going to happen. You're going to have to repeat yourself. Both you as a care partner and you as the person with the diagnosis might have to say things over and over again for it to sink in. Again, that's a part of the disease. It doesn't speak to intelligence, and it's not a sign that somebody is being willfully forgetful or willfully unhelpful. And like I said, since we are accepting that frustration is going to come with this sometimes, take a deep breath. When it's not quite clicking, when we're having those days that we're not on the same page, maybe head to the bathroom, take that deep breath, and try again later. If you're able to recognize that you're frustrated and stop in your tracks in that moment and take a deep breath, then what you won't do is feed into that frustration and make it grow bigger than it needs to be. So take a break when things aren't working. When it comes to daily tasks, setting up a routine, some predictability, some structure, and it's still really important to continue meaningful activities. A lot of times the focus is on what you can't do anymore, but don't lose focus on what you can do, right? Maybe it's time to adapt those hobbies. Maybe the really thin needle point turns into a thicker needle point. It's okay to adapt those things. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. It's still really important to have meaningful days and have some creative thinking to make those meaningful things accessible to you. And that's a big part of what we like doing as social workers and dementia care consultants, is helping you creatively think about how to adapt those activities. Adapt the environment, right? Brighter lights, safety considerations. Something is a source of danger or risk, maybe put it away. Maybe it doesn't need to be in your line of vision. Take breaks when you need them. Take breaks from conversations. Sometimes it takes a lot of energy to keep up with a conversation. Take those breaks. Let them know you need a second to recoup. And also, it's okay to keep your sense of humor, right? We always want to remain respectful and compassionate, but laughing at a silly situation when it's appropriate can be the best restart button on a frustrating day. Self-care is really important. We say this a lot, and we say this so much sometimes that it might lose meaning, but self-care, again, I bring up the concept of not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, right? If self-care means getting a massage, then that's great. But these days, who can access a massage parlor? So now self-care might be taking 2 extra minutes in your shower. Self-care might be a 5-minute meditation in the morning. It might be arranging your day so that you can get more sleep. Self-care can also mean making sure to stay up with your healthcare providers and the activities that keep you alert and excited to start your day, social and cognitive activities. It's harder because of the times that we're living in to stay connected, but we do have some tips and resources around that. And finally, it's really important to keep your health, legal, and financial information up to date. Now, this might seem kind of contradictory, because what I said is that we're all living out our plan C's and D's and E's. So why even plan ahead? Well, the thing is, when we keep our health and legal and financial information up to date, if a crisis happens, we are dealing with a baseline that's already been set for us. That's a gift that your past self is going to give your future self. So there is still some really important planning that does need to happen. We do have a separate class on that, again, because it needs to be its own class, but we will talk about some of those things in our presentation today. Okay, and I think that is, were we gonna stop for questions at this point? I think we were.
Yes, we were going to stop, Mina, but I see, at the moment that no questions have come in.
Okay.
Sometimes, of course, people need a little bit of time to think what are their questions, and that's, so let's just continue on, shall we?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
So now, and I was gonna continue, this is gonna be my section as well. So I'm gonna dive into some of those legal and financial considerations, our legal and financial class is typically taught by an elder law attorney. So this is a shameless plug for our programs. So that deep dive and those detailed questions, we're going to cover what we can in this section. But just know that there are answers to those questions, even if those answers aren't today or in this presentation. Because sometimes the questions that come up in this section really take a law degree to be able to answer, but those questions are out there. But things to consider. Quality of life is the name of the game, so we want to plan in advance. We want to plan for our physical health. We want to plan for our emotional health. And practicalities and spirituality are also important topics in a lot of people's lives. These conversations can be tough, right? We're talking about the progression of a disease. We're also often talking about the end of life. And so sitting down with these conversations can be an emotional experience. It takes reflection, looking back and reflecting on what's important. It takes documentation from a legal perspective, and also from the perspective of, if you're in a position where you can't speak your needs, have they been communicated in writing so that somebody can find out what your wishes are? And it takes communication. It takes leaning into that difficulty, that pain, that fear, to ultimately give that gift to your future self, right? That's the gift that you give, is having these conversations today, so that when emergencies happen or difficult life events happen, you've set up that baseline for yourself. So some of the legal documents involved in this is where we're getting really concrete. Durable power of attorney. There's two types of power of attorney. And a power of attorney basically means that you are assigning someone that you trust to help you make decisions if you can't fully make those decisions for yourself. This is somebody that you really need to trust for reasons that I don't even have to explain, right? This person is going to be taking over some big parts of your life. And there's two kinds. One of them is for asset management, the money that's to your name. The other kind is for healthcare. So the first kind might make decisions related to what you want to happen to your money. The second kind, the healthcare kind, might be helping make decisions like, do we want to move forward with this surgery? Do we want to move forward with this medication? Who are you going to give access to your health insurance or your health records? That's private information that typically most providers, because they're following the law, they're not going to give to anyone. But that last bullet that you see, the Waiver of Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, you want to designate someone to sign that waiver so that when the time comes that somebody else needs to access those records, they can do that. Advanced healthcare directives and posts are similar in that these are your wishes relating to medical care. Related to, do I want a feeding tube placed in me if it's necessary? If something happens that requires chest compressions, do I want that to happen to me? These are, very personal questions, and there aren't right or wrong answers. It's just about how you want the rest of your years to look, what your beliefs are, what your convictions are. And a will or a trust, of course, we hear about those a lot, but making sure that those are in place, because when the time comes, these topics can actually become a source of conflict. Sadly, that's a thing that we see a lot, is that when it hasn't been outlined super obviously, they can become a source of conflict as people debate on what your wishes are and what you want your money to be used for and what you want your wishes to be in terms of your health. Financial issues are also really important to consider. Like I mentioned earlier in this presentation, we're looking at growing supervision needs, right? We're looking at needing more help and more care as the disease affects more parts of the brain. So in what form is that care going to be? Is it going to be in-home care? Are we looking at the possibility of residential care? The truth is, where we are right now with our health system, Medicare and health insurance does not cover care in the long term. Medicare really addresses medical needs and rehabilitation needs. But when it comes to long-term ongoing care unrelated to a short-term medical issue, that often is a private cost, and it can be quite an expensive cost. So sitting down and saying, what are my resources? What are my personal savings, and what assets do I have to my name? Which ones can be moved around if they need to pay for care? If you have long-term care insurance, it's a good time to call in and see what it covers. And there are also some other resources like Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid, which is what we call it in California. We call it Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal does have some resources for long-term care, but you have to be eligible for Medi-Cal, which is its whole own conversation. It's different from Medicare. If I've thoroughly confused you, you're not alone, and that's definitely something we can walk you through a little bit on an individual level. Finally, if you are within the the VA system, there are some benefits related to caregiving in that system as well. Again, the VA can be hard to navigate. And so if you're trying not to rip your hair out, please let us know. We'll do what we can. One of these days, you're going to respond the first time I click, and it'll be great. And I think, Jean, this is where you take over.
Yes, it is. So we are going to go on now and talk a little bit about some safety planning. And again, we're just going to kind of touch on things, but these are all important and for you to be thinking about. And again, we can give you specific guidance as to your specific situation as well too. So what we're starting with is the question of home alone. As Mina referenced, with disease progression, with a diagnosis of dementia and disease progression, there does come a time where safety and supervision are the two things you're kind of weighing out. And of course, it's gray. It's shades of gray. It's not like one day a person is fine to be alone and the next day they're not. So, clearly cognitive abilities and functional abilities change gradually, and a person has a good day and they're okay to be on their own, and then a not so good day maybe and shouldn't be on their own. So for most of our care partners, when the person living with the diagnosis of memory loss is starting to get into the more middle stages or moderate stages, is when the care partners need to begin assessing on a pretty regular basis whether their person living with dementia can be at home alone. So how do you figure that out? Well, here's some ideas for you to think about. Number one, is the person living with memory loss able to recognize danger? And think about danger in all its forms. So it's not only the guy at the front door that's offering to do a new roof on your house for $10,000 and he prefers cash payment. That might be a dangerous scenario for a person living with memory loss. Are wildfires, being able to respond, understand that there's an emergency going on, to hear the alerts on your phone, to smell the smoke, to be able to know the proper response in that scenario, what to do. To if a smoke detector goes off in the home, to a fire on the stove, to getting the shower or the bath going and being, knowing that the water temperature is safe and appropriate, it's not scalding water. I mean, people who live with a diagnosis of dementia, for some of them, because of the changes going on in the brain to the parietal lobe up here, which manages our sensory perception, they may not recognize, first of all, that there's steam coming up off the water, that when their hand gets near the water, that it feels warm. People burn themselves and scald themselves because of the changes that are going on in the brain. So ability to recognize danger. ability to get help in an emergency. Okay, so if the house is on fire, or if there's a wildfire just burning over the hill coming towards the house, do they know what to do? If you as a care partner, I want to give you this scenario, and I sound like a doomsayer here, and that's not intentional, but what I want you to do is to, I guess here's what we say: plan for the worst and hope for the best, okay? Because we do have to be realistic. So what about this scenario? If you as a care partner fell and hurt yourself or fell unconscious, does your person living with dementia know what to do? How to call 911, how to get help in the home? And I'll tell you, just professionally, I've worked with actually several families who've had similar scenarios happen that didn't end tragically, but resulted in a situation where the person living with dementia was unable to call for help in an emergency, and the care partner was not able to themselves because of a fall or an injury. So think about that. History of disorientation or wandering, and I'm going to speak to this a little bit further here in a moment, but we know a majority of people living with a diagnosis of dementia will become disoriented and get lost and or wander away from home at some point in time. So it's good to have a plan in place, thinking proactively. And, how does the person living with memory loss react when under stress? Does it make them more confused, more agitated? Because all of that is just going to slow the brain down in terms of its ability, for a person to be able to figure out, well, what do I need to do in this stressful, potentially dangerous situation? So on the bottom line, that yes, as the disease progresses, 24/7 supervision is going to become required at some point. So plan ahead. That's the message here. Medication safety. I want to just go back one because I feel like, no, I guess it's coming. I'm talking a little bit to myself now, people. I do that. Medication safety, this is a big one because it's one that is very easy for mistakes to be made. And again, just think, if a person has memory loss, how easy it is to forget to take your medications or forget that you took them and take them again, and maybe 3 or 4 times during the day. And, the more medications a person is on, the more kind of management that requires. So medication is one area where we really encourage you to sit down as a family, as a couple, as whatever your dynamics are, to plan together for how this is going to be managed. And it's probably better for medication management to, if the person living with dementia is still taking their own meds, that's fine, but to have some oversight with it, okay? So some tips here is use one pharmacy for all the medications, because then that pharmacist, who are, by the way, a fountain of knowledge for all of you folks, a great resource for you. And for that pharmacist to be able to see, that's part of what they do on a regular basis when they are filling medications or filling new prescriptions, is they're looking at everything that is on file for that person. Are there drug interactions going on? Sometimes the doctors miss these things. And or if we're seeing 2 or 3 or more different doctors, a GP, a neurologist, a cardiologist, a urologist, whatever it might be. So ask about drug interactions yourself, and specifically, I'm talking about over-the-counter medications. I'm on a few medications for metabolic disorders. So I have high blood pressure and I have low thyroid. And I always, anytime I'm going to use any kind of over-the-counter medication, I always take it up to the pharmacist and ask to speak to them and ask them to just check for me, is there any kind of drug interaction going on, anything I need to be aware of? So use that knowledge and that resource. Use pill organizers. I'm going to tell you a quick story about this. I've told this a few times. I don't know if Mina's heard it, but my husband takes some medications as well too. And our dog takes some medications, okay? And so at one point in our lives, you know, we all just had our meds on the kitchen counter. We would each just take our own thing. You know, obviously the dog didn't reach up and take his own meds, but we gave them to him. And one morning, I still laugh. I still can't help it. I still laugh. My husband came in, I was getting ready, and he said, I think I just took the dog's medication. I said, no, really? And he said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I took the dog's medication. And so we went and kind of looked, and yeah, we were 99% sure he took the dog's medication. Now, as it turned out, the dog had low thyroid function as well too. So it was a thyroid med, which wasn't going to harm him for just taking one pill. But, you know, at that time at least, and, you know, there was no known diagnosis of dementia in our house. So I'm just saying, this can happen so easily, folks, for any of us. So use your organizers, which now we each have our own sections in this little wooden box we keep on the counter, and establish your routines. And always take your medications as directed. I can't tell you how many times I hear, and I still hear, about people who are adjusting their own medications or taking or not taking. And it just makes me cringe every time, folks. We are not doctors. We need to take our medications as they have been prescribed. It's just so important. And if you have questions, you know, about why, you know, I don't feel like I need to take this twice a day, or, you know, any of those questions or thoughts that you have, talk about them with your doctor. But don't take it upon yourself to self-administer or not administer. Another big one, driving. We have a class devoted strictly to driving and dementia, and it's a biggie, actually for all of us. At some point in time, all of us are going to either have to voluntarily give up our keys, no longer drive, and or someone else, perhaps family, perhaps the DMV, perhaps the police, will be taking away our keys. So it's going to happen, so let's acknowledge it and start planning for it. And with regards to driving, yeah, cognitive impairment affects your ability to drive and drive safely. It doesn't matter how many years you've been driving. And I've heard this myself many times, and I've heard it in my own family. I've been driving since I was 14 years old, and, you know, driven all my life, and I've never had an accident, and so on and so forth. And that's fantastic. But that has no bearing on here and now today with changes in cognition and in judgment and in sensory perception and all the different things, as well as just general age-related changes. So it's not about driving skill and experience. It's about your physical and cognitive abilities at this point in time. There are driver safety evaluations you can get done, and we can point you in those directions towards some of those. I think AAA offers some driver evaluations, and there also are some offered at a couple of our health organizations, at SHARP, for example, and at Scripps and Encinitas as well too. And so give us a shout, and we can give us a call, and we can point you to where you can get those done. Some of them may be covered by health insurance, and some of them would be private pay. You can always contact the DMV if you have concerns about somebody who's driving and you just don't want to get into kind of the fight about it. Please know that you can contact the DMV to actually file an anonymous report about your concerns about somebody's driving, and certainly the DMV, you can just talk to them to get some guidance on how to manage these situations, as well as contacting us. Partner with your doctor, and absolutely, if the doctor is saying you should no longer be driving, take that completely and absolutely to heart, because that then becomes part of your medical record. And if you are to continue driving and you are pulled over by the police, or God forbid you get in an accident and hurt somebody or damage property, if insurance gets wind of that, you could be opening up yourself to a huge amount of liability. So listen to what your doctor is saying. And also understand, and we go into this in our driving class, the doctors don't report people to the DMV about a memory loss issue out of spite or nastiness or anything like that. It is a legal requirement of theirs, and it puts them at great liability if they don't follow that particular regulation. We do have a wealth of transportation resources here in San Diego. So once again, call us, because we can get you pointed in the right directions. There are some really good options here. So we don't need to, it doesn't mean we can't get out into our communities when we've given up driving. And so, did that advance for me, Mina? Okay, thank you. Wandering, everybody is at risk, as I mentioned before. And I can't tell you how many times over my years doing this work that these three kind of quotes, as they were in the bubbles here, that I have heard over my years, and I'm sure Mina has too. And the most common one is, no, he's never wandered away from home. He's never done that. Well, the fact that he's never done that doesn't mean it won't happen. And in fact, we know statistically that a majority of people, as I mentioned earlier, 60+% of people with dementia wander and become lost at some point in time. And yes, it can happen on foot or by vehicle. And so sometimes, you get lost in your own neighborhood. Sometimes a person is driving and they miss exits and don't realize they've missed exits, and they just keep driving, and all of a sudden they're in an area that they don't know or don't recall, and a long way from home. So you can set up a local network, everything from letting neighbors know, so that if you have your person living with dementia you like to go for walks in the neighborhood, you could potentially let your neighbors know so that they can just kind of keep an eye out for you. We're all at home now, so we really do have those neighborhood network supports available to us. There's a couple of really great programs here in San Diego. The first one is Take Me Home, and it is run by the Sheriff's Department of San Diego, and they coordinate with all law enforcement in the county. So they work with all the different city PDs. It costs no money, it's free. And basically what you do is the person living with memory loss is information is put into a database that includes, just all the particulars of birth date and so forth, and, height, weight, and appearance, and a little, what is their issue? Is it memory loss? And then a little bit about habits. Maybe they normally would walk up to Vaughn's and then back home. So that within the database is some information about routines. And the idea here is that then if the person living with dementia is missing and is presumed to have wandered off, family members and care partners call 911. They say, my person with dementia is missing. And then 911, and you tell them that your person is enrolled in Take Me Home. And then 911 will access the Sheriff's Department. And then the Sheriff's Department will coordinate with local PDs to have their local PD patrol cars out there looking for the person. There's Medic Alert San Diego as well too. This is the one that's the identification program. People can wear a bracelet or an ID tag, necklace tag, and other items for identification, everything from iron-on clothing labels to keychains and such. So that's a good program as well too. And contact us and we can get you information about those programs. I see Brooke has just sent out the Take Me Home application, which is fantastic. Thank you, Brooke. And, you know, also know that there are all sorts of GPS and technology options out there. Everything from the not very expensive to the high-tech very expensive. And we've got information on that we can get to you as well too. Another important area is firearms. We know a majority of homes here in San Diego where the head of the household is 65 and older. Majority of those homes have firearms in them. And, you know, we're a heavily military county. And so yes, there's guns out there. And much like with driving, you know, maybe a person has handled and managed and used weapons for all of their life. Perhaps they were a career professional in, you know, military service or police officer or whatever it might be. And again, cognitive impairment affects a person's ability to safely use firearms regardless of those years of experience and skill. So consider removing the weapons from the home and or transferring ownership of the weapons to other people, and contact us. We can get you connected with some resources that can assist with that. Can install gun locks or keep them in a locked firearm safe. We do have a partner with this particular group in Poway that have given us free gun locks. And if you have need of gun locks, all you need to do is contact us, and we'll get some information from you, and then we're happy to send those gun locks out to you by mail. Important to keep ammunition separate from firearms, always. So, and for sure ask for professional help or assistance from local law enforcement if it's a, you know, a heightened concern area where somebody is not willing to give the gun over or keep it locked in a safe place and likes to be handling it on a regular basis. Then we need to kind of get some higher powers involved in assisting you with that situation. So we've covered a few things here, and I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, so I think we'll just keep proceeding here, Mina. I'm going to wrap us up here with some.
A question did just come in.
My apologies.
Just right now. What about technology and early onset or mild cognitive impairment?
Do we have any technology? Is there any kind of more specifics about that, like technology to help people with coping with day-to-day? That's what I'm thinking.
That's a good question. Yeah, maybe a little bit more.
There is technology for sure to support people, you know, with in the earlier stage of a diagnosis of some type of dementia. And, you know, our smartphones are some of the great ways to have some assistance there. I mean, using it to set reminders, everything from to take medications, to walk the dog, to, you know, unload the dishwasher, whatever it might be. You can be setting reminders. I think there's absolutely some really terrific online resources for scheduling and organizing and managing as family units, to be, you know, it's like online calendars and that all family members can be accessing and using to see when Brother Joe's going to go see Mom on Tuesday afternoon. So I'll wait and I'll go see her Saturday morning. And I also see that Dad is taking Mom to the doctor on Friday. So, and he's going to put an update here in this portal that, by the way, is private. It's only open to people that you invite into it. And, you know, Dad can put the notes from the doctor's visit in there so we can all see it. So that's some of the ways that technology can help individuals and families in the earlier stages of a diagnosis of dementia to just kind of manage daily life a little bit better.
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful.
I think in any stage of the disease or in any stage of life, simplifying is also always going to be helpful. Sometimes the best technology can just be a whiteboard and some Post-its too. And if that helps someone, even if it hasn't progressed past the mild cognitive impairment stage, if it makes life easier, it's worth exploring.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, all right, so resources. Well, I mean, this has kind of been our theme here today. I hope you've all gotten that from us. And, you know, Mina said you can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't. And, you know, ask for help when you need it. And I know most of us and most of you aren't that good at doing that, are you? Be honest. We're not that good at asking for help when we need it. And we need to get a heck of a lot better, people. And you folks especially do. You as people living with a diagnosis of dementia or memory loss, and you as care partners. And so as individuals, and also just as couples and families, and you know, whatever your relationship is, reach out and ask for help. And Alzheimer's San Diego is a good place to start getting some practice with that. Okay. And then here's the other part of it though, of course, accept help when it's offered. How many of you have had somebody offer to do something kind or generous for you when whatever has happened? Maybe you've been ill, or maybe it's been related to your diagnosis of memory loss, or maybe, I don't know, maybe after the death of a family member. It's everything from people offering to bring food to come over and sit with you, whatever it may be. How many of you have had that offer and your answer has been, no, I thank you, but I think I'll be okay. I think I'll be fine. So we try to be too independent sometimes, folks. We need to get over that. So ask when you need it, and accept it when it's offered. This is Alzheimer's San Diego, and you know, we're doing everything virtually these days, no surprise, but by George, we've got a lot of great things going on virtually. So just starting at the top, you can always talk to a dementia expert. We have a team, a great team, of which Mina and I are part of, in family support. And we are on the phones 8:30 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And you can just call and talk to, you just say you want to speak to a social worker, or talk to, yes, a dementia expert, or talk to someone about the challenges we're having, and you'll get directed through to our team. And, you know, you also have available to you our online, and you see our website there in the middle circle. And live chat is available online too. So you've got some options for contacting us there. We have virtual support and discussion groups, over 25 of them, I think, currently. And they are meeting again, just like we're doing here with Zoom. And we also obviously have classes like this, as well as many other classes. And in chat, just a couple of chats ago, I see that Brooke sent out the link to our webinar library so that you can see recordings of some of our past webinars too. And we've got our volunteer tech team, of course. And Tayan is with us here today, and our volunteer tech team is helping out with classes and with this, any of our virtual programs. But also, you know, if you're just having some general challenges with Zoom or FaceTime or whatever it is you would like to be using to stay in contact with family that's out of state, or that's absolutely here in San Diego, but you can't get together. And if you're having problems with that, give us a call. We'll get you connected with our tech team, and they'll do what they can to assist you. We have some fantastic social activities and outings that take place, some of them virtually, but some of them social distance appropriate outings. And the one I'm thinking of that was, I think it was a couple of months ago already, was at the Helen Woodward Animal Care Center, and it was a drive-in animal encounter. And so I actually went, and we all stayed in our cars, and the Helen Woodward animal care staff would bring the animal up to your vehicle, and staff had masks on, and I had a mask on. So we could roll down our windows and we could touch the animal and ask questions and stuff. It was really fun. We have reusable masks. We have a team of volunteers that have been busy at their sewing machines making masks. And if you are needing masks, just give us a call and we'll get those mailed out to you. That's absolutely not a problem. We have our virtual All's Companions program, and this is trained volunteers from all over the country, and some even from outside of the country, from other countries, that are matched up to families, to care partners and people living with dementia, some type of memory loss. And it's just an opportunity to connect with somebody new, to talk about shared interests, to form new friends and new relationships. And it's a terrific program. We have counseling sessions for care partners who are, just facing the challenges of not only doing the best to assist and support their person living with dementia, but that the pandemic and sheltering in place is also really impacting their ability to do that. We have a new program, Vite Alls. This is for anybody who may be living alone and living with memory loss, who would benefit from having a volunteer that would stay in regular touch with you, just to check in and see how you're doing. They would be kind of forming part of your safety and support network a little bit, and clearly also to form a relationship and be a friend. So all of these wonderful things that are going on here at Alzheimer's San Diego. And let me just see here. We also have, for any of you who may be interested, a series that we call Take Charge. And really it's a 5-week education and support series. So one time each week for 5 weeks, we come together for 75 minutes. And we do this really, it's kind of like today's class, Living with Memory Loss, but going deeper with it. And so kind of really getting into the meat of things in terms of living with a new diagnosis and planning for the future. If you're interested, we do have a series coming up in October, and be happy to talk with you more about that particular program. And again, there's more of our information on how to get in touch with us. And you've got all those different ways to do that. So, and that kind of, I want to just mention, we've got a couple of programs that are still coming up. Next week, we have Coping with Personality and Behavior Changes. This is for care partners, and that'll be next Wednesday morning. And then on Thursday, October 1st, Maintaining Your Brain Health, Mina and I will be getting together again to co-host that particular class. And registration is required for these classes, and you can do that online at our website.